Hi, we're at the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association's annual convention, and we're doing on the hour of every hour, we're doing 10 minutes technology talks. So I'm Gail Nolan with the Puerto Rico 5G Zone, and we're in the technology pavilion at the conference. And our next guest is Elizabeth Thelen. Elizabeth is I will say I worked with Elizabeth for many, many years, developing cluster and innovation strategies in the state of Wisconsin. Elizabeth has remained in Wisconsin, but has worked out from Wisconsin doing some really impressive global projects. We want to talk to her about some of those projects and some of the opportunities where Puerto Rico can plug into some of the best practices that Elizabeth has both observed and been part of developing. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today, and appreciate you being able to take time out of your schedule. So Elizabeth, as I said, we've worked on projects related to tech transfer and innovation projects. Could you talk a little bit about your role as the executive director for the Whitewater Innovation Center, and what makes that such a unique and exciting place for inspiring innovation?
Sure, and thanks to you, we are here. So we have a really unique mix of startups, inventors. Actually, recently a lot of inventors are coming out and asking for help, the local inventors, as well as educational, a K-12 connection in Wisconsin. We call that CISA. They're a cooperative agency. We actually have a hedge fund company, software. So it's an eclectic mix of startup to solid, sustainable businesses. And then we offer programming. We're out in a tech park, which we hope to grow. We're connected to the university, so I actually work for the university. And it's a very unique partnership between the city and the university to work together to attract people. So our community is actually very rural, but it's next to big cities, including Chicago is really not that far. It's an hour and a half, and Madison, and then Milwaukee, which are our capital, and then our great city on the lake.
Well, and one of the things I love about that project is that it is kind of it was quite literally built in a cornfield.
Yes.
In the middle of nowhere, but it's really thriving. And one of the things I remember when we were first building that, for that project, one of the clients at that time was doing some new algorithms for trading. And so there was literally a stock exchange floor mocked up so that they could test their algorithms in that. And that's the kind of thing that innovation centers give you the latitude to be able to create those environments. So it's kind of like a giant lab as a service.
Yeah.
So kind of leading up into that, I want to have you talk a little bit about your background and some of the work that you did specifically also at the Global Water Center, and creating innovation and acceleration programming. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the brew, and then kind of part two to that is talk about the NASA and the tech transfer projects that we had worked on together.
Okay, well, the Global Water Center still exists, doing quite well. They are in Milwaukee with a global headquarters, kind of the same thing, like an innovation center, even though that's not what they call it. I helped start that as a founding team member. We had an accelerator called the Brew. It was global, and for the most part, they came and they were in the building. Now that's not so much a requirement, but we were, and they still are global. So they are water focused, water technology, moving a bit into energy. And then as I grew, and we also then offered a pilot program, which I still think is needed, not only in the US, but in Puerto Rico, where people get to test their product. And so that's another thing we're bringing actually to the Whitewater Innovation Park. And part of the next wave, the next vision, is how do we support and find, that first customer, your support team. So we also did that at the Water Center. After that, you and I both worked on a project called the Midwest Innovation Exchange. That was a big challenge. That was bringing together the federal labs and industry and saying, how do we get that technology out? And, or in our case, we also did a project where we had startups and we matched them to NASA. So we would find people and say, how can NASA give you technical assistance? Could you do a CRADA? What else can we do with the federal labs? But specifically, we were working with NASA, even though we went to Argonne and others. In terms of my history, I then went over to the Energy Center only as an interim to take a look at what could we do next. So the one thing that's very unique, I think, in Wisconsin is we have a food, energy, water nexus that we have yet to leverage. But we do have the agriculture, and really food is massive in Wisconsin. Then we have the energy technology as well as the water technology, and all of those from manufacturing base and from a Puerto Rico view, all have cross-cutting technologies, of which Wisconsin has that inventor, engineer. We have brought so many things to fruition, our manufacturers, and it's been quite amazing. And that has leveraged me to one of my other roles where I work also with Gail and a private company, is to start a AeroX, which is an accelerator focused on defense and aerospace. And you're trying to get them contracts and accelerate that process. I now have moved from calling myself maybe, just a network builder, but to a network navigator. And I think that's true. What you do in Puerto Rico is you're really just navigating a network and trying to connect people faster to what they need.
Which is really the definition of acceleration. You're not teaching anything, you're just facilitating that rapid acceleration of their options. And I want to go back to you talked several times, you use the word lab, and for actual development. That's what we are as at the PR5G zone. We're a lab as a service. And I think that's what the Water Council, when they first opened up the Water Center, it had a water flow lab, so it's making tools available so that everybody can have access to the types of tools and information they need to be very successful in some of these very segmented industries. But as you noted, the connected, that there might be a technology that's used importantly in water. And just maybe you can talk real quickly about the water industry, because I remember the process of first identifying that there was a water cluster in Wisconsin. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
My favorite story is a woman came up to us at a conference such as you're at, but it was a water tech global conference. And she said, she was from Miami, and she said, well, we want to be a water cluster too. And we said, well, you can't make up the 100 years plus of history. Okay. So in any kind of cluster development based on Michael Porter's work, you have to have those parts and pieces. We already had education and a tech college degree that had been offered in wastewater treatment, but who knew, right? And then we had all these water manufacturing companies, and we did have startups, but they weren't connected. And then you also have the research within the universities to also come out. So did I answer kind of what you were getting at?
Exactly. Because what I loved was when you looked at the companies, there was, for example, there was one that manufactured water heaters, wastewater treatment companies, and manufacturers of outdoor pools and water slides. And so the question would be, well, how do those go together? But they're all concerned with water quality and water purity. And so it's
the other thing, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other thing that we did, I remember this distinctly, is looking at all the industry codes, because at the federal level, it wasn't defined that way. And so that was a challenge. And you could kind of approach the same thing in talent. So I love the conversation around cross-cutting technologies like 5G, but also in AI and all the ones you're talking about. But it's the same thing with cross-cutting competencies for talent. And so we need those. And that was going to be one of our next projects, but I'm not sure we ever did that. But that could be done.
It can be, and it will be. And honestly, what you just said was really key to Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico, it's figuring out those commonalities and those cross-cutting elements so that And especially on an island, you need a lot of that. And Puerto
Yes.
Rico has some really strong core competencies. And what does that make them good at, in addition to the one vertical that they've, has been a very strong, the bioscience industry. So you mentioned the accelerator program for AeroX. That's the Aerospace and Defense Accelerator that you've just founded. Tell me what makes that unique. So how is that different from just a traditional accelerator that a company might go through?
Well, number one, we started when we were all shut down, so we did it all virtual. So that was definitely unique at the time, to do things virtually. It's also, we looked for people who did know they had a dual technology. So they might have it in one area like blockchain, but I'm applying it to aerospace, which is my co-founder, Michael. But how do we apply it over to defense, and which department in defense would we work with? The other thing, I'm not sure it's that different, but we did pick partners. It wasn't just us. It was the partners that we worked with, like the Center for Technology Commercialization in Wisconsin, the Defense Alliance. I would imagine every state maybe has somebody like the tech commercialization. So picking partners, and I think the big thing was dual use. And then we actually walk through, you must build your quad chart. You need to present. And then doing a pitch day. And then we've been quiet a little bit, but we're just about to come back out again with astronautics and building out a center that cuts across. Now I talked about cross-cutting technologies, cross-cutting competencies, and now we're talking about the cross-cutting. Now I'm water, energy, defense. There's a whole slew of them, and at the moment I'm losing that thought. And it's with the Homeland Security. What do you call that list of 13 or 11?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm like, anyway, so we're just about to launch that.
We frame that as life critical technologies. So
it's basically life critical technologies.
And so it's important to national defense that we have capabilities in that area. No, and so that's great. And so we have talked about the potentiality of bringing that to Puerto Rico, that particular accelerator, because as you know, that's a new area of focus in Puerto Rico. I think it's been a focus for about the last 8 years. And in that small period of time, they've already hired over 6,000 jobs in Puerto Rico in the aerospace industry. We've got a big project with our new spaceport that's going to really need.
Yes, I'm jealous.
Various technologies, but how would you envision establishing a chapter of AeroX on the island of Puerto Rico with that very customized training on things like hub zone utilization and federal contracting and DoD compliance?
Well, I think almost like anything, if we're the outsider coming to the island, I would envision having a stakeholder discussion about what is needed and what people would want. So that just is a given, and we would do that through you and the board. And then the next step is also partnering with those accelerators that are already there, because I do think sometimes we get in our silos rather than leveraging the expertise. Because if everybody's just trying to accelerate and get their business going, or a new product, because it might be a small business, that's another thing that we work with. Again, you can leverage the assets that are already there, and then we would bring our own along the way.
Do you have, so we're just about at time here, we're probably a little over, but I just have one last question. Do you have like a favorite story of how you engaged with a manufacturing company in any one of these projects that you've worked on that makes a good example that Puerto Rico can follow as we're engaging with our manufacturers?
Oh, that's a tough one. Let me think, Gail.
Maybe through the NASA project, there was a company that I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think I recall, I mean, there were several really, but I think there was the one in water that was really impactful. That
worked with NASA with us? I can't.
Yeah, and maybe I'm not remembering.
I guess here's my answer.
Sorry, I
Okay,
threw
it's
that
kind-
answer out as a surprise, or that
No,
question.
that's okay. I mean, I do have a bias that I will admit, and that is that whole testing and piloting process. And I truly believe there aren't enough resources. So sometimes it kind of goes both ways. The manufacturer either can be the company that's coming out with the new product and they need to test it and they don't have their own R&D staff or lab. So they need people like us. Or it's the other way around. It's a new startup, a company, a small business who needs to test their IoT product on a manufacturing product in their manufacturing floor. But to marry that together, this is where the network navigation comes in. And you have to be able to find that. And we did that. I mean, you asked for a specific example. We did do that actually multiple times. And ever since I've been through that, I realize how many partners it takes to do that. And to do it on your own as a small business is absolutely challenging. From a funding, from a engineering, how do I get my product, a prototype fast?
Right.
And will a large company work with me to test my product?
Right.
And that's where manufacturers can really have a hand in that and then maybe license it as well, or just say, no, thank you. I don't want it.
You just perfectly described the purpose, the role of labs as a service. It's about de-risking new product development by providing tools and resources that wouldn't be affordable until the product is as well established. So thank you. That was great. But I think that's our time today. I really appreciate you having a chat with us. We look forward to additional engagement in the future. And these are just small snippets to kind of whet everyone's appetite about what the possibilities are for the future. And we're very excited. I'm going to read off of our board here, Catch the Tech Wave in Puerto Rico. And so
awesome.
We're delighted that you're part of that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.